I'm Greg, and you're listening to Totally Preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable. Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Totally preventable.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Polly, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Finally got some warm weather, although it's raining today.
We did get some warm weather,
Mhm.
and the rain has caused my grass to do some whatever things, and including poison ivy. I don't know if the rain had anything to do with poison ivy, but
maybe it'll make it.
yeah,
Tomorrow it'll be like growing
see,
out of control.
this is all part of prevention, and my poison ivy should be totally preventable.
It should be.
It should be. But I am I don't know what to do with it, so I'm gonna try and figure out. I mean, you've given me some tips, so
You and your family getting poison ivy is totally preventable.
yeah, it better be. It better be. I'm nervous, when it comes down to it, and this is a wild thing, and I don't know all the transmission ways, and very, very nerve-wracking. So
You've got it. You've got it, Greg. I have confidence.
thank you. And people listening may be like, well, what does this have to do with totally preventable? I'm looking for harm reduction. So I don't want my children to be exposed to poison ivy or myself.
Yeah.
So I want to reduce that harm.
Yeah.
Which ties right in with our guest today, Jose Martinez, who is the Hep-C and Harm Reduction Associate at the National Harm Reduction Coalition. See how we tied that in?
Nice. Very nice. Good
Yes,
job.
that's
Good
how we
job.
do. That's how we do here at Totally Preventable.
I'm super excited because we just found that coalition last week, looking for some help on harm reduction information, and they were excited as we were to do an interview.
This is going to be a good one. Very informative, because we are all walking that tightrope: prevention, harm reduction. So hopefully we're going to get a lot of clarity from today.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. So without further ado, today, joining us on our Totally Preventable podcast, we have Jose Martinez, the Hep-C and Harm Reduction Associate from the National Harm Reduction Coalition. Jose, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm alive.
All right.
And that's what really matters.
We're really, really happy to have you on here and educating us today on the great work that you do, as well as the National Harm Reduction Coalition's work. So thank you very much for taking the time for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. To start off, can you tell us a little about your story?
Well, I'm Jose Martinez. I'm 36 years old. As you said, I'm the Hep-C and Harm Reduction Associate for the National Harm Reduction Coalition. I handle like a lot of the peer support, like basically supporting folks on the ground that's doing the work. Currently, probably sometimes actively using. And I come from all of this is personal to me because, just like 5-6 years ago, I was like receiving services and, different syringe service programs in New York City, and, I was just like in a chaotic part of my drug use. So every time whenever I do my work, training, support, I'm really coming from that point of my life, because I remember what it was like. I remember what it was like transitioning from, that lifestyle of just doing what I want to like wanting to do something for my community, so I'm always having that in the front of my mind when I'm doing my work.
Awesome. Where are you located? Because the National Harm Reduction Coalition is all over the place, right?
Yeah, we national. I'm in New York. I'm in New York City. I'm in the Bronx. But we do have people all over the country. We have our main office is in New York, by 22nd Street. We have a California office in Oakland, California, and then we have like other folks that are remote, like DC, Tennessee, West Virginia, Texas, and yeah.
Can you explain to someone who doesn't really understand what harm reduction is, what it is?
Okay. I'm gonna split it into two.
Okay.
people who are familiar with harm reduction, they call it big HR, little HR, right? So big HR is the movement itself, right? We're a public health movement where, you know, we acknowledging that, you know, HIV, hepatitis C, those are affecting like our community, you know, and you know, our work, you know, although, you know, a lot of people, you know, won't agree with it, but we believe like doing things like giving out, you know, safe supplies like syringes and, you know, other, you know, equipments for people to use drugs, you know, eliminate that, you know. So like we're also, you know, focusing on, you know, different laws that are just point blank, they're racist. A lot of structures and cultures and bills that are passed, you know, they're based on racism and stuff like that. So we work on, you know, reversing a lot of, you know, a lot of those, you know, laws and approaches and stuff like that. That's the big HR, like it's the movement itself, you know, it's a public health movement. But then there's the little HR, like what I was speaking about in the beginning, where it's the actual intervention and the approach, right? You know, so yeah, you can have organizations that are giving out Narcan and syringes, but they're also at the same time promoting harm, right? You know, there's a such thing as that. You know, we believe that, yeah, we can give the equipments, but without that actual I love you message or you are worthy of more, you know, it means nothing. We're gonna have people just staying in one place, you know. So that's what the little HR overall is the approach. Harm reduction, there's like a misconception that there's this like harm reduction versus like the abstinence-based structure, which is like what we're typically used to, like rehabs, therapeutic communities, detoxes and stuff like that. And it's not a us versus them thing. You know, because like, let's say somebody comes and asks me like, hey, do you know like a detox or a rehab you could send me to? Just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean that I'm gonna tell them, no, you know, you don't want that, trust me. No, because different people thrive under different structures. I just happen to thrive under a more loose structure. Some people, they need that, right? And it's for the person to say if they want it or not, you know. So but it's just that is a different approach, you know, and in harm reduction, we believe that every person is different, you know, every person, because, you know, like service is not a one size fits all thing. You know, like there's some people, like I said, that they might need the rehab, that therapeutic community structure. But then there's other people that just need to experience, you know, something different. Like for me, for example, when I was in the chaotic part of my drug use, I tried rehab and I walked right out. You know, it wasn't for me because I was introduced to harm reduction first, where people was telling me like, yeah, you're using drugs, but all right, if you're not ready to, you know, leave using drugs, why don't you like do something for the community? And it was actually that message that actually got, you know, that changed the way I was thinking, you know, because everywhere else that I really went to, like it was a that drug is doing, you know, is not good for you, it's messing you up. And if you want to do better for yourself, you need to stop using. And like whether it was true or not, that's not what got me going. You know, a person was like, you know, live your life the way you want to live it, but do something good, right? One good message that I ever got in my life was like a lot of people, you know, like either give too much or they take too much. And it has to be a perfect balance of it. Like it's very toxic if a person only gives, you know, and doesn't receive. It's very toxic. And it's toxic on the flip side also if a person only takes. What are you going to do to balance that out, right? And the person told me like, yeah, live your life, but give back to the community. And that message caused me to want to be a Hep-C navigator. That's how I started like my work in harm reduction. Being a Hep-C navigator, helping people get, you know, hepatitis C care, because that's affecting our community now even more than HIV, because we have a U equals U, which is untransmittable equals undetectable. We have medications, we have housing support and all of that for people with HIV. But with HCV, like we in New York City alone, we have like close to 90,000 people living with Hep-C, you know, and that's not good, you know. And if we look at how many people are actually receiving the treatment, then we'll see like there's a bigger problem with with hepatitis C. You know, but then from there, you know, like, so seeing that I was really without college, you know, I have a GED, you know, I was really good at something. Hep-C, you know, being a Hep-C navigator is like, I'm really good with people. I'm like a sponge, I can learn. And it made me really want different for myself. I started experiencing different things in different organizations I didn't like. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to be an advocate for my people. And, you know, this is where I'm at, you know.
Mhm.
Mm.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of that, you know, personal parts of your story. One thing that really stood out was how you said, you know, organizations can give out Narcan, but without that "I love you" message attached to it, is what is it? So, you know, I think a lot of organizations can learn from that. My next question for you is, what would you say is the biggest misconception? What would you say is the biggest stigma or false thinking or false thought when you tell somebody that you're in harm reduction?
Well, I'm sure you heard this. You know, a lot of folks think that because we're pushing for like, you know, when the harm reduction started coming out of like the White House, you know, everybody was, oh yes. And then Biden just came out of nowhere and said, yeah, but you can't use that money to get crack pipes, you know. And a lot of people was like, yeah, you know, because we don't want to be condoning drug use. And this actually goes to the whole part of, you can give out Narcan and syringes and still be creating harm. And it's like, you know, we know that, you know, passing out any drug equipment, name it, the equipment that we pass out, it eliminates, you know, viruses and diseases from being passed. You know, the same thing is with crack pipes, but we still on this, oh, but you're condoning, you know, drug use and all of this. You're enabling people, like at the end of the, like, for me, like, once I get out this call, I gotta go to the supermarket and I gotta walk past a bunch of people on my steps that are using, you know, and this is in my apartment building, right? This is our reality, you know, well, for me anyway. You know, like, so what I look like, I'm walking by these folks every single day, right? And mind you, we say that a person doesn't have to use drugs to be affected by somebody who uses drugs. Like, how many couples have we seen that one of them is using and sometimes chaotically and the other one isn't, right? So I have that and other things on my mind. So I'm gonna give out syringes and other equipments to them, you know, because I know that if somebody doesn't do that, that situation is going to get worse, because drug use doesn't have a face and it doesn't look a specific way, no matter how they paint it. You know, we're not condoning drug use. We're not condemning it either, because not one of us God. It's not none of our jobs to save a life, to save a soul. It's not our job to judge nobody. Our job is to, like, we make the best out of where we are, you know, and that's all we're doing. You know, because like all of these supplies that we pass now, if they wasn't passed out, we would have more HIV cases, we would have more Hep-C cases, you know. So people, and then people need to, like, and then another thing on that is that, like, let's talk realistically. We have people who use drugs, we have sex workers, like, this is a real thing. We have poverty, we have people that's trying to make it. This is a real thing. You know, this is our way of showing up for this community, a community that nobody's showing up for. Honestly, like, if it ain't drug use equipment, it's something else that, you know, they're gonna, you know, bring up. Like, we have to think, let's think about how everything was handled during COVID. You know, everybody stay at home, you know, and everybody stood at home. That includes the people who run these organizations, medical clinics, all of that. Guess who couldn't stay at home? The people who was homeless. And then everything else kept on happening while everybody was at home. People was sharing syringes, right? Because they couldn't go to organizations for syringes. Bathrooms was closed, so people was using the bathroom out in the street. Sanitation stopped coming. So, like, just so much. Parks was closed off. Banks was closed. So there's no charging, no phones, no none of this, right? So it just left like a whole community out, you know, by themselves. right? Imagine how that made them feel, you know? I stood out about 2 weeks. I stood away from outreaching because it was new to me. I had to figure out how to do this safely. The organization I was working with at that time, outreaching, like we had to talk about like PPE and stuff like that. When we came out, like it looked like a ghost town. But then when they finally saw we was giving out syringes, the looks on folks' faces, the stories they was telling us. And it's not because nobody wants to put themselves in a bad position. You know what I mean? But people are they're gonna do with what they have. So people was using syringes. Some people was repackaging syringes that was used and selling them as new syringes and stuff like that. Like this is all for survival because everything was cut off from our people. So like my whole thing is if it's not one thing, people are gonna, bring something else up and something else up. Months after that, about 2-3 months, we had a state of the state by Cuomo. And Cuomo said, because there was this big deal with the same area that I'm talking about, the South Bronx. There was like a lot of stories that people was using in the public, just out in the street using and stuff like that. And like, I'm not going to say if it was true or not, but look at the circumstances, but instead of approaching it in a more holistic way, in a more like neutral way, the response was, hey, don't arrest the people that's homeless in the street. That's unethical. But in that same sentence was like, arrest the people who are using out in public. And it's like, in that situation, you're talking about the same person. You're talking about the same group, the same people, because that's who folks are talking about. So like my whole thing is, like instead of looking at stuff like we've been looking at it all these years in a punitive way and it hasn't worked, why don't we try something different? And that's what harm reduction really promotes, is like we're doing something different. We don't have time to hate. We've been there, done that, and we've experienced it on both sides sometimes. You understand? So it's like that's the best thing we can do.
All right.
Yeah. So when you're doing your harm reduction, can you tell us what like a day in Jose's life looks like?
So I outreach once a month with an organization that's called Bronx Mobile. And that's like when I do my community work, we'll drive around the South Bronx and, hand out bags with syringes, Narcan, sometimes food in there. But usually I'm at home. I'm doing a lot of trainings every day. I'm on a lot of meetings, just promoting, just like different like health stuff. I'm like putting together like one of my projects, my babies that I'm working on right now is like structuring our National Harm Reduction Coalition's peer services, but on a national level, and like bringing all the peers from throughout the country, into one space. And because like that's one of the biggest problems, right? For folks that don't know, when we say peers, we're talking about like the people on the ground who's responsible for keeping organizations going, the people who's navigating people into care, the people who are currently using and doing community work, but are being black sheep and stuff because of how they view stuff. So just getting them all into one space and creating that structure, right? Because like in a lot of places, like people have what's called EAP, which is employee assistance program. And it's like there's a mental health service for like full-time workers, and a lot of organization peers, which are usually the backbones of the org, don't qualify for that because they don't do full-time hours or and stuff like that. And there's other stuff that like peers who do the most work in this field don't have access to, like retirement benefits, health insurance, stuff that everybody else who do way less than them have. So like my plan is like, getting, a bunch of like-minded folks in one space and just like, let's get it for them. Let's get it for them now. And a lot of harm reduction spaces, we're hearing folks talk about what you call it, like union, excuse me.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations are talking about unionizing, right?
Yep.
peers aren't part of that conversation and won't have access and won't be eligible for that if it does come into play. You know, and stuff like that is a problem, because what that tells me is that a peer, the most important and essential person in the organization, his job is not secured and or valued. You know, and a lot of times they're kept in one place. There's a lot of people who've been, you know, working 10 hours for an organization for 15 plus years. And it's not that they don't want to come up, it's that the organization don't want them to come up. So like, really, I'm just working on like building down those numbers so that we can start, you know, like, you know, really taking on these, you know, initiatives that's needed, you know.
Now, is there a code that you follow for harm reduction? Is there like rules of harm reduction?
Do no harm, right? But then let's be honest, sometimes, you know, you're gonna do harm, whether it's intentional or not. And, you know, and this one thing I said from the beginning of my work in harm reduction, I have been allowed to hold myself accountable, you know, and that's what we do, right? Because like harm reduction, we understand, you know, people make mistakes. We understand that it's not that people are dead set in their ways all the time. Maybe that's just how they was raised and wasn't given no other, right? So there's always room for accountability. So like, even though we say do no harm, we also like acknowledge that harm is gonna happen, and we're willing to hold ourselves accountable, you know, because that's the first step to tackling, you know, white supremacy culture. You know, there's no accountability in those cultures at all. It's a my way or the highway, and that's it. You got to take it, you know. And so there's language that we don't use, right? Like we don't use the word addicts, we don't use the word fiend, and you know, just like a lot of other terms that is more like labeling, you know, like in term and replacing addict, we'll use stuff like people who use drugs, but more on paperwork. We're more into just like viewing the individual. How do you want to be, you know, referred to as, you know, what's your name? We value, you know, gender pronouns, right? Because we acknowledge, you know, people not addressing people the way they want to be addressed, you know, has caused people to, you know, suicide, lose people to care, you know, people, you know, go into a chaotic part of their drug use again, you know, die, you know, and stuff like that. So language is like a big for us, is like the most important thing is language, you know, because with language, that's the first chance you're going to get at restoring anybody's dignity, how you speak to them, you know, especially like if you're in the like as an outreach worker, one thing's for sure, two things for certain, you're going to walk into someone using, right? You're going to walk into someone with a needle in their arm, and like you can approach it how you would have approached it before harm reduction, like, yo, what the hell, you know, get that out your arm. Or you can approach it like, hey, you got enough syringes so that you know, you'll be good. You need any equipment, you hungry, you know, how are you feeling? You know, those messages mean everything, you know. And one thing I always bring up to people is like, you know, we don't know what a person, you know, is going through or went through, you know, that day. I think about like when I used to sleep in the streets, you know, I would come off of like the train, and from right off the train, you know, I'm going right to like what's now called On Point, you know, but Nairi was what it was called. But I would go to them so angry and all of that. And, you know, just the messaging and the love that I would get from them really like meant a lot for me, you know, going from, you know, being woken up hands and feet on the train to like people who are looking at you, like telling you what you're worthy of and uplifting you, right? Because people could say whatever they want, you know, they could speak, you know, life into somebody, but their actions don't really meet, you know, their words. Like these are folks who is not only telling me that, but they're like, yo, you're an intelligent person. Do you want to be a Hep-C navigator? Or, you know, I have people right now, they're like, yo, you know, because you came from this organization, we would love for you to work here, you know, and that means a lot, you know, because now it's not my drug use they looking at. They looking at my being, me, what I'm doing now, you know, the movements that I'm making. And that means a lot, you know, and that's the point that we need to get everybody on, you know, like we need to like look at, you know, the person, you know. That's another rule that we run by. Like we look at the individual, You know, a lot of people, you know, when they walk up to somebody who using drugs, like usually their first instinct is to, you need rehab or something along those lines, when sometimes they just want to conversate.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Hey, how you doing? Everything's all right? What's up? How's your family? And those kind of convos mean everything to them because they don't have them. They don't have them with anybody else.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So one of the things that drew us to the National Harm Reduction Coalition is, so we're a prevention coalition and we're funded through state and federal money. So I'm sure you know how that goes. You have to stay in a certain lane. And more recently, we have been taking on harm reduction. And so we have been researching, you know, how we can participate in harm reduction past passing out Narcan. And so we came across your 8 principles of harm reduction. I know you do big elaborate trainings on that, but can you give us a little snapshot of the principles of harm reduction?
Okay. So like this is like what I usually, you know, in one of my trainings, you know, I'll pull up the principles of harm reduction.
Mhm.
There's 5 or 6 of them, right? And you know, my favorite one is always going to be the health and dignity, because like, you know, when we're dealing with health and dignity, we're speaking life into people. You know, it establishes the individual and community life and well-being, right? So like we're when we're speaking to people, you know, our goal is to get them, you know, from not really, you know, not really caring about health issues, you know, to like wanting them to. So once we're telling them you're worthy of like care, you're worthy of being treated a certain way, of having a job, all of the above, you know, it starts making it clicks stuff into them, because people aren't usually telling them that. People are telling them what they feel they should be doing, and not is usually not what's best for them. You know, one thing, and I have a saying that is, if you don't know, you don't know,
Mm.
right? And that's what it is with with our community. You know, it's like folks don't, you know, this is not normally given to them. You know, so if they go around, you know, and everybody's telling them that, you know, they no good, they're not gonna do nothing with themselves. Well, guess what? That's what's gonna happen, you know, because they don't know. You know, they don't know how to, you know, be empowered and all of that. Our services, when we talk about any services being implemented in programs, you know, like whatever service we're thinking of, the community should be included there. You know, and then there's another side to that quarter, right? Because yeah, you know, we want to implement services in the community, but it's not services that we want. The community needs to tell us what services are needed. A lot of times we see organizations pop up, you know, and then they're offering all of these services that's not really affecting that community, you know. So you know, always, you know, being mindful of that, you know, with participant involvement. If we always, and you know, when we talk participant, we're talking community member. You understand? So when we're involving them, we're very much being in sync with the community. We're creating those relationships, you know, and connections, you know, and you know, when we hear the community and we listen to the community, you know, we know what's needed, you know, and that's where the, you know, the previous, you know, principle really comes into play.
We have a saying we use here. I always get it wrong. Greg will feel free to correct me. Not about us without us.
Not for us without us.
Not for us without
Nothing about us without us.
us.
That's a harm reduction saying too, right? And
Yeah.
that's so true, right? You know, because so much, you know, so many times we see it even now, our community being exploited. So many organizations getting money to do certain works that they're not doing, you know, and if they are, they're treating our community a certain way. We have organizations out here that are going back to the old school 1-for-1 approach, which is like a person bring a syringe, or the amount of syringes a person brings, that's how many syringes they can get. Right. And that has been proven to like be actually counterproductive than anything, you know, because sometimes people they're not in a position to be carrying all them syringes on them and all of that, you know. So it's just so participant autonomy for me is always is going to always be my favorite, and it's going to always be my end goal. You know, because when we talk about participant autonomy, we're talking about that person being able to stand up for themselves and basically do, like, if I'm a navigator, I'm trying to give as much information and education to this individual as I can. That way, come Saturday and Sunday, when I want to be at home cuddling with my cats, I don't get a call like, hey, my stomach hurts. How can I go to the ER and stuff like that? I want them to be able to, like, step one is to do, you know, for themselves Saturday and Sunday. And as we progress, you know, we'll see that they'll start doing this 7 days a week for themselves. You know, my whole thing is about empowerment. You know, there's in this movement, they pacify our people, you know, and that's a hard line to walk, right? Because we're not about judging people. And I'm not about judging nobody, but I'm not about leaving nobody in one place. In harm reduction, we say we meet people where they at. And usually that's where that saying ends with a lot of people. But the real saying is we meet people where they at and we don't leave them there. And when we say we don't leave them there, we empowering them. We're teaching them like, hey, look, yeah, you got a lot on your plate, but how can I help you move forward? And then when that person articulates how they can move forward, we helping them get there, and they watching and they learning, and you know, eventually they're gonna be standing on their own. That was like the whole process with me. It's like people, one, they started with telling me how worthy I am, but then started giving me different coping tools, different tools. Don't act like this in the job, try to be like this, you know, try to stand a certain way so that you're not judged as a Latino. You're going to be looked at a certain way, so you have to uphold like a certain, like a level of ethics with you while you're on the job and stuff like that. Those was giving me the tools that I needed to go for each step that I was going higher. A lot of times, like, people are just giving folks needles and whatever syringe or supplies that they need, and then that's it. They're comfortable with them coming every day. I'm not. I want to see you come up. You know what I mean? Because that's what it should be about. Community, lifting the community. There's not none of that nowadays. Now they go with because if more people get empowered, the less money they're gonna need. That's how they see it. And that's a sucky way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
Social cultural factors, right? So we have to acknowledge, like, you know, the person's background means everything, you know, because even if we don't treat them a certain way because of where they from, it don't mean that they're not going to get that everywhere else, you know. So, you know, we're speaking about that, you know, we're letting them know about that also, you know, so that they're aware of it, right? Because, like, one of the biggest things that get our community is the why me attitude. Like, something bad happens to them, it's like, oh my God, why me? And then, you know, they go back to doing what they was doing and they lose faith in it, you know. And like, the more information you give somebody to prep them during certain situations, you know, it will help them. It'll help them more, you know, so that they don't get discouraged by barriers and they actually see it as a challenge, you know, like, and stuff like that. And, you know, we're realistic, right? So how we was just saying, like, we don't condone drug use, you know, we just don't condemn it, you know. And on the same side, like, we acknowledge the bad stuff that comes from drugs, obviously overdose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that, you know. We just rather look on the bright side, you know, rather than, you know, go like with the old school messaging about drug use and stuff like that. So we acknowledge, you know, drug use, you know, it can have people overdose and makes people act a certain way, you know. And but we also feel like if we teach safer use techniques and managed use techniques, you know, it could lower those risks and stuff like that, you know. But we have to be willing, you know, and that's the thing about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome.
Oh, great. Learning so much.
Right?
It's just like wow. I need my pen and paper going at all times.
What do you think the biggest needs in the community are?
The biggest need in the community is we need more programs, right? Because, like, look, 2020 we had 100,000, you know, overdoses, over 100,000 overdoses. And the government's response was something called Operation Overdrive, which is putting a bunch of agents in the hard hit areas, which really what they mean is put a bunch of agents in the hood, right? And just arrest a bunch of blacks and Latinos. That's what they mean, you know. And that sucks because that's like the punitive approach that we was talking about. We're talking about over 100,000 totally preventable overdoses, right? And the one approach that they feel they need to do is send more cops out. Harm reduction, we've proven that, and like take for instance, the OPC that just opened up in NYC, right? I don't know if you've been like keeping up with like what their statistics look like since they opened up, but there's no syringe litter there at all. There's a school right across the street, right? Even they are saying like they need to stay in that community. The drug activity went down. The streets are cleaner. Nobody's staying outside, right? Everybody's inside because there's a drop-in center in there also, along with there's all wraparound services in there. Every single service you can find there. If not, they can definitely refer you somewhere close to get it. You know, there's no people outside. Everybody's inside. People, you know, they have a higher percentage of people accessing services.
Wow.
You know, like that means a lot. Less overdoses in that area. They reversed over close to 1,000 overdoses, no fatal overdoses.
Wow.
A handful, 2 handfuls of those was naloxone was used, and half doses, so not 4 milligrams, 2 milligrams. All them other overdoses was reversed with oxygen.
Wow.
So what that just tells me is that our approaches needs to be completely different.
Yeah.
Like we need to stop arresting our way, you know, like it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. Drug use still happens in prison. I don't care what nobody say. It still happens in prison. So you're not stopping the drug use. You're putting them in more of a situation that is a more riskier situation for them, because prisons are not harm reduction focused at all, right? So it's like we need to do more. We need to have different approaches. We need more harm reduction focused programs, you know, that have access to, if they need that abstinence-based structure, they have that access also, you know, but we cannot keep with the same approaches that we've been having all these years. Like it hasn't worked for us at all. There's some people that it's worked for. Don't get it wrong. You will hear some people say if police didn't arrest them, they wouldn't be nowhere, and you know, the police intervention and all. Yeah, there's people that say that, but for the most part, no, there's not.
Right.
You know, and that's what we need to look at, because like New York City, we got the highest homeless rate right now. Every day we got a higher number of homeless folks, and we not the biggest state. That's what sucks about it. You know, so we just need a different approach, man. Like the being punitive, it doesn't help at all.
Right. Jose, when you think about the community, what can organizations do? Because so many times, like you mentioned, they come in, organizations come in, they're here for a minute, they're gone, they're not following through with what their commitments are. How does an organization like your organization, like the Harm Reduction Coalition, how does an organization come in and gain the trust of that community?
So, look, man, I listen to the Spanish rapper called Cancelbero. That's means three-headed dog in Spanish. But he says the youngins, they look in your eyes for the truth now, you know, and that is the truth. That is reality, right? Like I remember when I was a participant, right? And I knew there was a few different kinds of staff. There was the well-meaning staff who really genuinely wanted the best for you. And because they had that experience, right? Because they've been there, done that. Then you had the person who they genuinely feel for you, but they ain't been through it, but they say they've been through it, right? And then it keeps going. There's like a lot of people who, some, a like they don't relate to your situation. They just want the numbers. There's others that like they don't relate to your situation, but they want to do better for you, right? There's all these kind of peoples, right? And the reason why I said that is because we, like us, where we from, we know how to size people up really good. Even that's something that never left for me. Like to this day, you tell me 1-2 words, and that's enough for me to look you up and down and like give you some portion of what kind of person you are, and we need that to survive. That's where I got those skills. When I was sleeping in the streets, I needed that, right? And that's what it is with our community. Like for me personally, when I'm not professional. There's no space that I go in and I'm trying to be like this professional guy, suit and tie, and there's no space at all that I'm trying to do that. And that's including when I'm doing my outreaching. It's not that I'm trying to show people I've been there, done that. I just don't want them to feel like I'm not that person they can't talk to. And that's where like, a lot of people like once they start outreaching, like the job gets to their head, they start looking down on people or looking at them through up their nose and stuff like that. And like, I always try to be mindful of that, because like it's really easy to get, inside your head, and, it's really easy to forget where you come from, and I always try to remember that. And they see it, I speak to them about the same things, that I'm not scrunching my face when they smell a certain way. I'm not trying to tell them what's bad for them, or what's good for them, and that means a lot, we all fall short. We all have our biases. And I just think like the main objective is, are you willing to let that bias jeopardize somebody else's life or well-being, and that's something that I had to learn over these 5-6 years. I've been 8 years in harm reduction. Over these last 8 years in harm reduction, that's what's been on my mind, like all these biases I have, I'm gonna let it, control me, so now certain people are affected or aren't affected, so yeah.
Wow. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. So if there are community members listening and they really want to help, they want to help your community, help their own community around this, do you have some suggestions on how they could reach out and help?
We had shirts saying this like 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was a harm reduction saying, but support your local needle exchange, right? And that's the best thing like I could say, right? Like get in contact with like these community organizations, right? Whether they're overground or underground, right? Because if you go to like these hard hit communities and you stick around, like to watch, you start seeing certain people come giving out food, giving out syringes. Like out here, not every organization that does outreach is funded to do so and stuff like that. So like support your local needle exchange, find out what's going on in your community. A lot of people, they like complacent with, oh man, I just, where I'm from, like everybody nods off and then that's it. Like help out. Like we have to understand that drug use, the drug is rarely the problem. What we need to look past that drug. We need to figure out why they're using, what their mental health situation looks like, their housing stability, their family situation, their communication with community. Johan Hari is his name. He's from somewhere across seas, the UK or something like that. But he said that the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yes, we say that. Yes.
Right. So that came from Johan Hari. Well, the first time I heard that, it came from Johan Hari. And that's the truth, man, because like ever since I got that message of, like giving back, and like I've been like meeting so many people from my community, from the world and stuff, and like I'm a better person because I don't feel I'm alone. Like I don't feel that no more. But before harm reduction, that I did feel that. I felt like my back was against the wall and I was swinging for defense. Like, and that was really my mind state. And it was when people started, including me in the community and stuff like that. That's when I didn't feel the need. Well, my fighting approach is different now. It's verbal now. right? You understand it's not physical. And as I elevate, it looks different, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. I like how you flipped that and you said my fighting approach is different. That's big because the fight's not over.
Yeah.
I like that. For people who got a glimpse of the 8 principle training that you did, the 8 principle presentation that you did, and for people who want to learn more about the National Harm Reduction Coalition, where do they look? How do they contact you?
Okay. So you can for trainings, the a standard way of asking for trainings, right, is emailing training, TRAINING @harmreduction.org. And we have one person that triages the training. If you want a training from a specific person, like me, you can email me, Martinez, MARTINEZ @harmreduction.org. Or if you know the person's last name, the trainer, you can email them, and we could set up the trainings ourselves. Some of our contracts allow us to do free trainings, but we also have a fee for service, which is like we usually do like training packages, for folks. We've done like training series for like organizations and regions. Also, like we had a Southern Foundational Friday, which we did a bunch of trainings for organizations in the South and on different topics: harm reduction, cultural competency, LGBT competency, and stuff like that. So it really depends what they want, but we do have a fee for service that's more, is more is better. And then we have our free ones. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all this information. It's been great. We really appreciate it. We appreciate all you're doing. We loved seeing Batman back there. You mentioned another cat though. Who's your other cat?
I have 6 cats. I got I'm a cat. So there was definitely part of my life being changed. Yeah, I have a cat lady. She's upstairs.
Oh, no, I was calling you the crazy cat lady.
Oh yeah. I am. They changed my life. You understand? So, and people don't understand, like, oh man, it was them that really made me want to change. And now I live for them. Like, I just pay the rent. They own the apartment.
I love it.
So I gotta ask, because you said South Bronx a few times, and every time I hear South Bronx, I can't not hear the song, in KRS.
South Bronx, South Bronx.
But I also peeped the hat during it, so I gotta ask, is it Knicks and Nets, or is it Yankees and Mets? Which one?
So I live in the Bronx, but I'm from Brooklyn. So okay. I'm Brooklyn, and I do Brooklyn Nets hats and I do New York Yankee hats. I don't go outside of that.
All right.
Outside of it, I'm gonna be honest. Like, and I don't wear nothing but Brooklyn and New York hats. I don't do no other states. I'm like a hard body New Yorker.
All right. I appreciate that. You're all right with me.
That's right. I really appreciate I appreciate this time and this space, definitely.
Thank you for all the work you're doing too. Thank you.
You're awesome. Thanks.
Appreciate you. Yeah. Y'all be safe.
You too.
All right.
I'm Polly, and you've just listened to Totally Preventable.